Hello and welcome to Should You Play, our video solution to your gaming curiosity. Today we're talking about Visions of Mana, the latest installment in the beloved Mana series.
The 2020 Trials of Mana remake is one of my favourite games, and although Trials is not considered a mainline Mana game, I was so excited when Visions of Mana was announced. I pre-ordered the game, enjoyed the demo, and then fired up Trials of Mana again to whet my appetite for the release of Visions.
The game's reception has been primarily positive, with reviewers highlighting how Visions brings the Mana series into the modern age whilst not ignoring the game's flaws. Since this kind of game is not normally my cup of tea, I ever gave Visions of Mana a try, hoping it would retain the charm of Trials of Mana. So let's start by talking about the main story.
Basically, the game is set in a fantasy world where individuals are routinely selected by a fairy and given the coveted honour of becoming sacrificial alms, who must embark on a pilgrimage to offer up their souls to rejuvenate the Mana Tree, whose energies sustain the world.
You play as an optimistic young Val who attends a fairy welcome festival in his village with his girlfriend, Hina, who ends up being selected by the fairy. Val is known as the best swordsman in the village and has been trained to become a soul guard who must unite and protect the alms during their pilgrimage and ensure they fulfill their duty by offering up their soul to prevent their town's destruction.
The pair eagerly set off on their grave pilgrimage as if leaving for a long overdue holiday, having absolutely no sense of danger or self-preservation whatsoever. Hina is proud to be a sacrificial lamb, Val is proud of her, and proud to be her soul guard.
Their acceptance and joy about their solemn fates might seem odd, however we are shown earlier the dire consequences of an Earth Alm and her soul guard attempting to flee instead of dutifully skipping off to the Slaughterhouse of Mana. This reaction is more realistic and palatable. I could feel a bubble coming up then. Sounds very Logan's Run, this. This reaction is more realistic and palatable, but seeing the devastation in their wake, which includes people being turned to stone, makes it more understandable that individuals would since be socially engineered to view being a duty-bound alm as a great honour.
Although the Mana series is not known for being a narrative powerhouse, the basic premise is actually quite good. The execution, however, is very shallow. It's so surface level and never explores anything deeper than we're off to Tree of Mana because we've been chosen as alms. Don't laugh.
I was about to do that.
A soul guard Val is one hell of a gal, or is he a man? Who knows?
Brilliant. I love it. That's brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Each section of the game entails travelling to the village of the next alm, discovering that the alm hasn't yet been selected, helping the alm potentially...
So many alms.
I was going to try to see how far I could keep that going. Helping the alm potential overcome some personal difficulty, then watching them be selected as the alm and become best friends with the rest of the group out of nowhere, rinse and repeat. There is no character development, deep thought, personalities, relationship developments. It's just a handful of empty-headed fools skipping off to a slaughter with big fat smiles on their faces.
You can't be together after you reach the Mana Tree, you know.
What do you mean? We can't not go to the Mana Tree.
Without internal conflicts and a macro enemy, the game is just shallow and feels pointless. Wait, there's no big boss?
At the very end, it
just
comes
comes
out of nowhere. Yeah.
Great, storytelling 101, guys.
Yes,
Well done.
It's ridiculous. One could argue that this acceptance of fate has a dark undertone, and by not seeing the darkness behind the smiles, I'm missing the point of the game. But if there is meant to be this undertone, then it doesn't come across very well. All I see is mindless morons. During Val and Hina's journey, they gain the aid of elementals.
The main character and his entourage are the kind of people you might not be initially too fond of, but they do grow on you. It feels like they have been plucked out of other games and mashed together into a strange entourage of misfits. The character relationships definitely needed more time to develop. When Morley first joins the party, the group acts as though they have been friends for a long time when they have only just met.
These are my friends. Friends? I see.
Heather really enjoyed Morley's story, but the extent of his personal development ends the moment he joins your party.
I actually thought that his down-to-earth personality would mean that he would detest to being chosen as the Alm of Moon, but nope. No emotional depth there either.
I humbly accept this mission.
What about the spunky no-nonsense Karina, the Alm of Wind? Nope, she actually insists on becoming an Alm to prove herself.
Hey, fairy! What? Appoint me the alm!
Absolutely no emotional depth or intelligent thought amongst the entire group. It's infuriating waiting for a revelation that never occurs.
As the alm and sacrificing my soul. It's terrifying. Never mind. I'm probably overthinking it.
Vel and the group also befriend someone who views the entire Olms tradition as barbaric due to his past experiences. We thought this individual would provide the emotional depth and deep thought that we thought the game was lacking considering his backstory, but nope. Instead of Vel being the hero who changes the world after being told by this new friend that Olms did not always exist, the entire brainwashed party just keeps repeating their mantra, we must fulfill our duty as Olms and Soulguard. It wears thin quickly.
This new friend intends to use the Mana Sword reality warping powers to rewrite history to before the tradition of sacrificing Olms was established, but in doing so he accidentally frees Diallophos, or however you say it, this game's last minute out of nowhere antagonist. So basically, the only person who sees how absurd Olms and Soulguards are is painted as a villain in this game, when I'm totally on his side. He could have gone about it differently though.
So yes, that's the face value plot in a nutshell without giving away any spoilers. Other people have noted that the story progression suffers from the same issue Tales of Arise did, whereby most of the game feels well paced but the third act feels rushed and is an endless exposition dump, but it didn't really feel that way to us. Perhaps how underwhelming the story felt in general made us go involuntarily deaf for the third act.
This storyline is like if, in Tales of Arise, Alphen and Shion were happy about their own fates. Alphen loves his mask and makes no attempt to remove it. Shion loves being X-Men's rogue and they both dig the status quo of slavery. Where's the conflict? Where's the development? Like in Visions of Mana, it would just be about travelling from point A to point B. There has to be an overarching good versus evil conflict from the start for the journey to feel worthwhile and for us to overcome turmoil and be victorious. Without that, the game feels so soulless and empty. I can't describe how much I didn't care about the characters or story. I just enjoyed exploring the open areas of the game and taking in the beauty of my surroundings. Since Mana games traditionally have a typical lengthy JRPG narrative, the last thing Visions of Mana needs is filler content, but thankfully, exploring, collecting and side questing does not detract from everything else.
The only downside is that the length of the main story is shorter than expected, seemingly to compensate for the time spent exploring the semi-open world. The areas themselves are full of detail and retain the vibrance of previous games. It was nice to see wildlife roaming around, such as deer, rabbits, cats, dogs and more.
Sadly, there's not really much to do in these large open areas except engage in battles, initiate combat challenges, there's the occasional chest and smashable pots, but other than that this world is pretty empty. It was really nice to see the return of Lil Cactus, but the rewards are very mid. The more you have a look around, the more you realise that the world has very little to offer, and therefore, there's little incentive to explore.
The world design itself in Visions of Mana is excellent. We start in Vel's hometown, which is already bigger than what you would expect to see for a small village. You can linger here for a while, soaking up everything from your surroundings and smiling over the merchants dancing. Little did we know that the first area you visit outside the village is absolutely huge.
I was so shocked at how massive and aesthetically gorgeous the areas actually are. The world shares the vibrancy of previous games, but suffers from visual normalcy being too big and empty. By that I mean instead of having odd surroundings like blue gems embedded in rock, we have realistic trees and grass that we've all seen before in a million other games.
We're even given a pickle fairly early,
Pickles.
which is quite cool but is merely a means of watching the empty world whiz by faster as we go from point A to point B. Genuinely, a game as small in scope as this doesn't need to be this big. One thing we do love about the world is how you can interact with things to get around by tapping into the elemental's magic, such as activating wind tunnels to thrust you upwards and slowing down platforms like we saw in the demo. Often if you come across an environmental obstacle you can't use, then chances are you don't have the party member or ability yet.
Anyways, let's move on to the combat system, which is fast-paced, chaotic, live action, just the way I like it. You can toggle between characters who all have different abilities and weapons. This system is much more customisable owing to the elemental vessel system.
This new mechanic is basically a character class system tied to the elementals, that allows up to 42 possible classes across all playable characters, making it much more complex than previous games. This system reminds us both of Octopath Traveler, where classes, known as jobs in that game, are interchangeable between all 8 playable characters.
Although I liked the job system in Octopath Traveler, I'm not sure how I feel about the elemental vessel system in Visions. It just seems unnecessarily complicated and detracts from anything that will make each playable character unique. There's definitely something I don't like about the combat and connected systems, and it's difficult to put my finger on what it is.
Executing actions can feel a little sluggish, and it takes characters a long time to cast spells or recover from being knocked down or hurt, leaving them vulnerable. At its most basic level, the combat is very similar to Trials of Mana. You melee attack enemies, creating combos to fill up gauges so that you can unleash more powerful attacks, such as Clash Strikes.
Clash Strikes are powerful moves that can be triggered once your EP meter is full, and they come with flashy animations, a mechanic not uncommon in these kinds of JRPGs. However, the EP meter refill rate isn't as generous, and unlike other similar games, including Trials of Mana, the EP meter is shared across all characters, which is just plain mean. Due to this, if you initiate a Clash Strike with one character, then all characters' EP meters will fall to 0. Rather than allowing players to perform 3 Clash Strikes in quick succession. Boo!
This also means that the combat feels less bombastic and chaotic, and instead of allowing a strategy of sorts, you end up just melee attacking most of the time to build up the meter again. It feels more hack and slash, and even the effectiveness of moves is unsatisfying in how unimpactful they feel. Due to the elemental vessel system, there is a learning curve when it comes to combat. When you change a character's class, their abilities and effectiveness against certain enemies will change in tandem, and it can become confusing.
So yes, I'm not too keen on the combat or class system, which forces players to overthink. I don't even like the ring menus here, or the Clash Strike animations. It's so hard to articulate what my problem is though. It feels watered down in some ways to cater to a wider gaming palette, and unnecessarily complicated in other ways.
Which leads us nicely to the music and overall vibe of the game. Anyone who has played a Mana game is well aware of how quirky and fun they are in tone and music. The developers have clearly made an attempt to modernise the series with Visions of Mana, and in this they have been successful, but sadly by sacrificing the quirkiness. Heather shall now elaborate further.
Yes, the overall vibe of the game feels wrong. They have tried to make Visions of Mana more normal and watered down rather than sticking to the eccentric style that works. Things like Lil Cactus, the Dancing Merchants and other staples of the series feel like they have been randomly thrown in to appease existing fans and loosely tie this game to the series to remind us we're playing a Mana game even though it doesn't feel like it. The selection of music does not do the game any favours either. I was expecting to hear the same quirky, playful musical scores I heard in other Mana games, which adds to the whimsy, but instead we get melancholic piano scores, orchestral pieces, and completely out of place and tone jarring musical placement. This misplaced music makes it difficult to know how we're supposed to feel about what's happening on screen and the dialogue being spoken. The music is all wrong for a game like this. It's too westernised and tame.
I'm headed to the Mana Tree, so this is my goodbye to the parish.
Don't get us wrong, the music is excellent and would be great if used in another game, but for Visions of Mana it just doesn't work. What Heather is describing is exactly how I know she felt about Tales of Arise. They made the game much tamer than its predecessors in terms of characters, story and gameplay to make it palatable for the masses, which unintentionally undermined the fun vibe and all the little things that she loved about the series. I also agree that the music definitely doesn't help the game's overall vibe. I suppose more drastic examples would be if the next Pokemon game tried to be more grown up and serious, it would throw the vibe completely out of whack. Or if Fallout 4 had Final Fantasy VII soundtrack, it just wouldn't work, even in the correct context.
Okay then, let's stick together.
So, should you play Visions of Mana? Despite all the negative things we have said about it, I would still say it's worth playing. A lot of the negatives are due to my own disappointment. Visions were lacking something for me. It took me a while to put my finger on what the problem was, but now I've realised my issue. Visions of Mana is soulless.
So ultimately, if you are new to the series, then Visions would be a really great standalone game. Existing fans might not appreciate the changes, which throws out everything they loved about the other games in favour of an empty world, 2D characters, a disastrous story with no depth, and a combat and class system change.
Let us know what you think about Visions of Mana in the comments, because I'm positive that we are not alone in thinking that this game lacks the creative zeal of the games that came before. I've been Heather.
And I've been Craig.
This is Amalgamingle, and thank you very much for watching.
Even with the moon sphere, I was powerless to stop it. Again.
Woohoo!